All right. Welcome, everyone. Today, I have a real exciting guest. Mike Thorn is here with me, and we're going to be discussing, because it's his release day, we're going to be discussing, we're going to be discussing his work, but we're definitely going to be discussing Darkest Hours, which, as I just said, was released today. How's it going, Mike?
Good, man. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm great. So you also released a book called Shelter for the Damned. I didn't mention that in your but this book here, Darkest Hours, it came out in 2017 originally, right? This is a re-release?
Yeah, so it was released originally in 2017, just with the 16 stories. And this re-release has author notes for all of those stories and a foreword by Sadie Hartman, new cover art by Mikio Murakami, and then there's also a section of 17 essays on horror cinema as well.
Mm-hmm. So were you filled last night with anxiety and maybe some dread about today at all?
Yeah, you know what? Weirdly enough, I was feeling strangely kind of, I don't know if it was anxious. There was just a lot of energy. I had a difficult time sleeping. So,
Yeah, no
and
doubt.
my body jolted me awake at 6 a.m. like I was, a kid waiting for Santa to come or something. I don't know. So it's good though. It's all good.
Do you have like those light dreams where your brain just spins the same topic over and over again? Like, for example, today it would be about Darkest Hours. You'd like have a picture of the cover in your head and people's reaction to it, and your brain just won't stop.
I do get those, yeah, recurring dreams, and those kind of banal nightmares are so they're stressful and they're not like they're not anything you can do with. I actually like the most distressing, surreal nightmares. I don't enjoy them while I'm having them, but I can repurpose them for my fiction. So I'm like, all right,
Yeah,
there's some use to that.
just as an aside, I know exactly what you mean. I have like some of these fucked up, completely weird dreams that would probably freak out most people, but I'm like, oh, that was awesome upon waking, right? But I'll
Yeah.
have like the most mundane dream about hanging out with people or something. Nothing's going on, and I wake up and I'm like, oh my god, that was horrible. It's all about the emotion, right? That you
Yeah.
feel. Well, if you're excited and whatnot, and if you have monsters tearing you apart, it doesn't matter because you're having fun in the dream, right?
Yes.
The unconscious mind is like a weird place.
It is actually. It's interesting. This is a bit of a detour, but I had a sleep paralysis episode a few months ago that actually ended up turning into a story. The first story in my next collection, Peel Back and See. The story is called Havoc. But it was so vivid. It actually took me, a while to realize, oh, that was just a dream. It was, distressing while it happened, but I got a story out of it. So, thank you, Cthulhu or Satan or whoever.
Whatever evil force was behind it.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm glad to know from reading your notes. I'm glad to know that Jim Thompson is an influence to a lot of your work because I haven't read everything by Jim Thompson, but what I have read is like blown my mind. And I find that because I'll read people's books and it'll remind me of Jim Thompson. Maybe it's just like the characters or the tone of the novel or even like the prose, and I'll tell them about it, and they kind of give me like a who stare. So I was really happy to see Jim Thompson mentioned more than once.
Yeah, he's a huge influence. I'd say he's one of the two primary influences on Shelter for the Damned. It was mostly Jim Thompson and Hubert Selby Jr. were the writers who influenced Shelter for the Damned. But I went through a period of maybe 2 years where I was just devouring all the Thompson I could get my hands on. It's
Yeah,
just incredible, huh?
yeah, for sure. He really knows how to. Uh, he really knows how to make what seem like simple characters very complicated.
Yeah, good point. And his books are really tight too. They're
Oh yeah,
not. There's no extraneous material in them. They're just like bullet fast, but densely, psychologically dense, and
yeah,
thematically dense. Yeah,
for
incredible.
sure. You actually bring up a lot of writers in your author notes, and I absolutely appreciate that because I haven't read them all myself, um, but I have read some of them too. So it's fun to see like, oh, okay, I got to check that guy out, or Oh, that writer's awesome. You know what I mean? Now, you have another collection coming out this year called Peel Back and See. You just mentioned it. Are you going to be doing that again for that?
That is a good question. I just started talking to the managing editor at JournalStone, Scarlett R. Algie. Shout out, Scarlett's the best. We're talking about design and things like that. I don't know. You've given me the idea. That could be kind of interesting. It was cool to do with Darkest Hours because there was years between the writing of the stories and the reworking of the author notes. Whereas with Peel Back and See, a lot of the stories are a lot fresher. But I don't know. You've got me thinking on that now, Jason. Thank you.
I think you should, honestly, because you know what? A lot of people bring this up. I've done a fair amount of research on you in preparation for this interview, and a lot of times the people who read this expanded version, they talk about this, and it seems to be a fan favorite. I know I personally enjoy reading where a story came from. I know, I say this all the time, but I'm always asking it all the time. Where do writers get their ideas from? I don't want to know where you get your ideas from, but I want to know where you got the idea for this one particular story. And so it makes sense. I think a lot of people are curious about that, and so it's fun to read that stuff. It's also fun to read the influences that go into it.
Yeah, I'll mull that over. I'll float the idea past Scarlett. I'm sure, once I look at the stories again, it's interesting. I feel like writers probably read their own work in a much different way than the average, or not the average reader, but just an external reader would. Because when you read the story, you remember where you were at when you wrote it, what music was playing, maybe like what you were reading around that time and things like that. So I'm sure I would get a rush of that if I looked back at the stories.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll float it past Scarlett, and we'll see what happens.
And Nikki mentioned Timmy's. I always do the Timmy's thing because I'm a coffeeaholic, and so this is for you, Nikki. It's like a thing between Nikki and me. I always showed her cup, and she's like, "Oh, it's Timmy's."
Is that Nikki between Dark Pages?
That's the one.
Shout out to Nikki. She's great.
So when is Peel Back and See coming out? I think it's October, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, late October 29th, if I'm not mistaken.
Awesome. I'm really looking forward to it after reading what I've read from you. So since we're here to discuss Darkest Hours, which again is released today, and if anyone has any questions, please post them. Let's get some audience interaction going here. I think this is a good time maybe to do a reading excerpt because well, who won? You put a post out last night in Twitter. I haven't checked in the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours, so I don't know who won or which story won.
Hair won by a significant margin. So I will read from the story that has caused a lot of gagging at public events on multiple occasions. I think I sent one of my aunts running out of a bookstore at one point. So sorry about that.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah. Well, I do what I can. So yeah, maybe I'll just read the first few pages of Hair and then.
Sure.
Okay. So this is from Darkest Hours Expanded Edition. This is the first story in the collection. Tonight, Theodore voluntarily ingested hair for the first time. He hadn't seen a barber in years, and it showed, but he never made the effort to keep his locks from landing in his meals. He always let his bangs hang untethered as he tended to the pans on his stovetop. The decision to leave his mane untied while cooking had excited him for quite some time. Truth was, he loved nothing more than gliding his utensils through a plate of hot food and uncovering a hair curled between the ingredients or rising from the sauce, like some illicit secret. In the past, he'd always left it at that. The discovery of a hair was exciting in itself, even dangerous. Tonight, though, when he saw not one but several of his own hairs twined around a spear of asparagus, He made no move to pick them away. He felt the familiar physical reactions: accelerated heart rate, a warming face, the prickling alertness that seemed somehow to bring his every follicle to life. And rather than cutting the sensation short, rather than riding the wave of excitement and then, post-climax, removing the hairs and going on with his meal, he smiled to himself and nodded. His life as the manager of a dirty, dead-end rock and metal t-shirt shop simply didn't afford him enough joy. What could be so wrong, then, with allowing himself such real elation when it presented itself? He pierced the asparagus and lifted it from his plate, watching as the hairs swayed slightly from its shaft. Then, careful to avoid allowing the greasy threads to drift uneaten from the vegetable, he plunged the fork into his mouth, closed his eyes, and chewed. The fibrous morsel broke down and yielded to mastication, but the hairs twisted and slithered about inside his cheeks, as if consciously resistant. Theodore's pulse was a frenzied storm, as he filled his mouth with saliva and sucked with his throat, a reflex forced into motion. Every moment of consumption was heightened, intensely tangible. The twining within the mouth, the slipping between the teeth, the tugging and slithering sensation as the hair went down, and the final, distant feeling that his throat was clogged with something forbidden. In his ecstasy, Theodore could hardly continue eating. He tried to steady his quivering hands and eventually pushed through, gobbling every last crumb. Not a single bite came close to the orgasm of the hair-spun asparagus. Some might refer to Theodore's hair obsession as unnatural. He was under no delusions to the contrary, but any time he seriously questioned himself, any time the nagging undertow of his thoughts rose up to scream, "There's something wrong with you," any time the guilt bubbled up from his unconscious, he leveled his brain with a coldly rational rebuttal. What could possibly be more natural? Theodore understood his existence through only two comprehensible constants: life and death. Everything else, the chaos that came between the cradle and the grave, was unpredictable. What, then, could trump hair's utter completeness? Hair was both dead and alive. Some said that even after human beings bit the dust, their hairs continued to sprout and extend. Others argued that this was an illusion, simply the result of flesh receding from a corpse's skull. As the skin disintegrated, the roots of the hair exposed themselves, thus providing the deceptive image of extended length. To Theodore's mind, hair filled the tenebrous space between those two reliable poles, living and non-living. Nothing set his body alight, like discovering hair in unexpected places. Nothing more thrilling than to consume the manifestation of existence's paradox. So that's the opening of Hair.
Yay, awesome. Do you get to do readings very often? So that was very good.
Thank you. Pre-COVID, I did. And I've done a couple collaboration things. I did a piece with Mark Tams, who sadly passed away just within the past year. Rest in peace. But yeah, we did a collaboration on like a musical version of a story from this collection, A New Kind of Drug. And I'm collaborating with a local musician right now. His name is Josh Dez. He records under Wolf Camo. We're doing a piece together. But yeah, pre-COVID, I did some signings and readings, but who knows when or yeah.
It's kind of, even now it's still kind of weird to say, pre-COVID or, pre-plague.
Yeah, for real. Yeah.
Dana Decker had a comment. She said, "I hope this isn't something that offends him at all, because I mean it as a huge fan. One of my favorite books is Scott Smith's The Ruins, and the movie, and his writing reminds me of that story."
Interesting. Well, thank you, Dana. I actually have not yet read or seen The Ruins, but I've heard very good things. So I will take that as a as incentive to check it out. Thank you so much.
So Hair.
Yes.
It's really, I found it was really the best story to start this collection, because it really sets the tone, I found, for what this collection is capable of doing to you, because this collection does do things to you. just like your novel. And you know what? Nobody likes hair really, even though we tend to have a lot of it. And everyone has like I found a hair in my food story. So I
Yeah.
was wondering what was the exact, do you remember the exact situation that first gave you the idea to write this story?
Um, I remember I was just I was interested in the feeling of revulsion that people get when they discover hair in their food. I don't remember. It must have been a conversation I was having with a friend, or maybe I was like out for dinner with a friend and they found hair in their food, and I saw that, you know, look of horror and disgust that crosses one's face when this happens. And that was, for me as a horror writer, one of those light bulb moments. I thought, what is that about? Um, and at the time, I was also reading a story called The Thing, A Phenomenology of Horror, which seeks to find an unhuman phenomenology, which is kind of a paradox. But essentially, the book is interested in the alienness of the human body. So a subjectivity that is kind of distanced from the material conditions of its past. All this is to say that I was interested in the fact that when removed from our bodies, these filaments become so alien and abject to us. And then I was also very interested in writing about addiction. So I think it was those three things coming together that became hair.
Well, it's very effective.
Thank you.
There was a few times where I stopped and I was like, ugh, you know, like didn't
Right.
gag necessarily, but there was definitely that ugh.
Beautiful.
Oh, hey, Mark Allen Gunnels, he was on the show twice this year actually. And he asks, as a huge short story lover, or so you enjoy working here, I'll put it up here.
Cool.
Do you enjoy working on the short form, and what do you find are its particular joys?
Thank you, Mark. And yeah, shout out to Mark as well. Fantastic, very talented writer, and just a lovely presence in the horror scene. So thank you, Mark, for stopping by. Do I enjoy working in the short form? What do I find are its particular joys? Well, for one thing, I find short fiction writing is frankly just more manageable than novel writing. Novel writing, obviously it's much larger, it's more time consuming, there are more moving parts. So just in terms of process, it's more complicated to navigate through a novel. I enjoy the limitations of short fiction because I find usually my stories will begin with a specific theme or image that I want to explore to its fullest potential. I think a novel is similar in some sense, and that exploration just expands and proliferates into different forms. But yeah, I enjoy the inherent limitations of short fiction writing, if that makes sense. The containment. I don't know if that's a very clear answer, but I'll have to, yeah.
Dana Decker says that she gagged.
Thank you and sorry, Dana.
The next story is Mictian Diabolus.
Mm-hmm.
It's a slasher story. I really enjoyed this one because I like my slashers.
Fuck yeah.
And so I was wondering if you were ever considering writing a novel that's a slasher novel.
Yeah, I'd love to. The novel I'm working on now originally took inspiration from a couple slasher films, Tobe Hooper's The Funhouse and Rob Zombie's House of a Thousand Corpses. But the novel had other ideas and became more of a kind of a supernatural horror story. But I've actually been floating around the idea of writing a slasher novel set on a college or university campus, either focusing on the faculty or the students. I think I haven't really seen a slasher novel set or focused primarily on a humanities faculty. So I don't know. That's something I've just been thinking about. I haven't started it, but maybe I'll get to that eventually.
I think you would be able to do something very special with that. Honestly, I would like to encourage you to do it sometime in the future.
All right, I'll do my best. Just got to make my way through this novel I'm working on now alive, and then we'll get to the next one.
A New Kind of Drug was a very interesting story. This one, it was very weird, but in a good way. One thing I noticed about it and your writing in general is how you're able to seamlessly take two different elements of horror and put them seamlessly almost together.
Oh, thank you.
In this case, you have the weird drug, and there's another element. I don't really want to spoil it. Do these types of elements come together at the same time when you're about to write a short story, or do they sort of develop on their own as you're going through the writing process?
I think it varies from piece to piece. I think there probably is a fair degree of maybe stylistic dissonance in a lot of my work, probably as a result of the fact that as a reader and as a viewer and as a person, I make no distinctions between quote unquote high and low art. So I will, maybe be reading, I don't know, a Ciaran book at the same time as I am, devouring 1930s or 1940s Bela Lugosi Poverty Row films. And I think all the stuff I'm just devouring. Same thing with music. I'll listen to Claude Debussy and then I'll listen to like new metal. So I think just like all of that, maybe it's just pure madness funnels its way into my work, and all those textures and stylistic variations find their way into my work, if that makes sense.
I'm currently having some issues hearing you. I know that everyone else can hear you because I just tested it.
Okay.
You're coming in clearly, but it's my headphones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you the next question. It's a two-part question anyway.
Okay.
And then while you're answering, I'm going to go run and get a different pair of headphones.
I know it's real slow.
Yeah, they're dying on me. So, okay. So the question, actually, I'm going to mention Kayla Lenzen on her channel today. She did a release day review of Darkest Hours, and I thought it was really, really cool. And she mentions the story, The Auteur, and she says it seems to be a reader's favorite, and it certainly was mine because I was one of those kids going to video stores when I was a kid, and I absolutely loved doing that. Hunting for movies and whatnot. But I was really happy to see at the end in the notes that this story was inspired by the Cipher. That's one of my favorite books, and it did have like a really strong Cipher atmosphere and tone to it. And I even thought of like the story isn't really all that similar to the Cipher at all, because Cipher is about a hole in the floor, right? And this is about a movie. It's completely different. But I remember thinking, I think it was the tone of the story. I was like, it's like Cipher a little bit, You managed to capture that dread and the ugliness that was in that story. So how were you able to capture that grim narrative from Koja's masterpiece? Was it intentional? Did you intentionally go into writing it thinking, I want to write a story that feels like that? Or did it, again, just develop as you were writing it? And also, how were you able to turn, 'cause in your notes, you said you worked at a video store and it was a great time in your life. So I was wondering, how did you turn what was a good time into something that was really fucked up?
Okay. So first thing first, did I set out to write something as a direct tribute to Kathy Koja? It's never as overt as that, I don't think. I think my influences find their way into my fiction more organically. First and foremost, The Auteur arose just from my lifelong passion for film, and in this case, particularly horror films. So I wanted to write a story that had a distinctly cinematic quality. And around the time that I wrote it, again, I had just been devouring a lot of Koja's fiction, not only The Cipher, but Skin and Kink and Strange Angels and Extremities and on and on. Everything I could get my hands on by Koja, I was picking up at that time. And then as for how do I turn a pleasant time in my life into a horror story, I guess the quickest answer to that is just, that's what I do as a horror writer. I take the familiar and the benign and I turn it into something grotesque and sinister and not so beautiful. So I think I answered both of the questions, Jason, and hopefully your new headphones are... Can you hear me? Let's see. Can you hear me okay? No. I can continue talking. I don't think I can see the questions on the screen right now, but I see Nikki at Dark Between Pages had a nice comment. She said, Mike, you're in demand. That's what I'm talking about.
Can you hear me?
Appreciate it. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
Okay. Do you want me to remove my earphones?
I don't know what's going on here.
Let's try this.
Honestly, I think it's my microphone.